Some of my earliest memories of this great park started right here in what used to be called Hanna Barbera Land. Scooby-Doo and the Gang, Fred Flintstone, the Smurfs, and other beloved characters, all produced by William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, at one time dotted this section of the park.
The Hanna Barbera section, as I said earlier, was a natural fit. I mean, that as much as anything influenced the merger between the two companies. But we had to build a dark ride. We had a dark ride at Coney Island, which we rebuilt 2 or 3 times, and then the high water would come in and take everything out of the park. That was, again, I hark back, why did we want to leave Coney Island? Because the more we tried to improve Coney Island with animation and rides like you're talking about, the more vulnerable it became. And I had an old expression, I always said, you can stand a flood in your basement, but you can't stand a flood in your living room. And we wanted to become a living room. So anyway, back to Kings Island and the dark ride, we bought a lot of, in fact, I went to Japan and bought all the animation for that ride. And then I hired a guy at Kings Island by the name of Dick Harsley, and he was a great designer. He worked with animation. We never had a creative guy on our staff like this. And one day I'm walking downtown and I'm in front of Pogue's window and I see this guy doing these wonderful creations. And I knew we needed a guy like that, so I walked in and I found out how to reach him, and I pulled him out of the window and I explained to him what we're doing. I said, we'd like to hire you. So I hired him for Coney Island out of Pogue's window, and he did the first dark ride, not the first one, but he revamped the dark ride at Coney Island, and I remember we were so proud of this. It was very sophisticated for Coney Island at the time, and lo and behold, the river came up and washed it all away. And I was just glad to get to high ground at Kings Island. So Harsley was the guy that really kind of designed this ride in conjunction with Hanna Barbera. And it was interesting because of some union problems at the time. We had to lock Harsley in that ride for a week. We had to lock him in the dark ride. We'd smuggle food to him because he was non-union and that was going to be a problem. There was a lot of stories like that, how we got through some of the hurdles. But and obviously, we made a number of trips out to Hanna Barbera and talked to Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera, and we themed every ride we could with the Hanna Barbera theme, and it was extremely popular. It was a win-win. It was a win-win for us at Coney. It was a win-win for Taft, and I think brought everybody together and made us all very proud of that park.
The design actually emanated from Hanna-Barbera Studios in Hollywood, and they created more or less a cartoon expedition, you might say, and then we recreated it 3 dimensions. And all the figures that you'll be seeing throughout the ride are life-size, especially Gulliver here. He's about 15 feet, and the rest of the figures are probably around 5 foot. It'll be a nice opportunity for the kids to see their favorite cartoon characters in real life rather than on a TV screen in front of them. You get into a boat and come through a giant-sized TV screen surrounded by all the Hanna-Barbera characters, and you just sort of float very smoothly through a nice, wonderful cartoon world.
Bill Hanna was a very, very close friend of mine. He became close because I was the liaison between the park and the Hanna Barbera studios. And we were working on the music and the idea for that ride and what it was going to be. And I went out to the studio and I spent a week with him, and we worked on that concept and idea, and it had all the Hanna-Barbera characters, but inside were different musical sections. But the song is Cartoon Friends with Funny Faces, Jinx and Those Little Measy Chases, Anthill Mob and Wacky Races, Live in My TV. I'm friends with Fred, who yells out Yabba Dabba Dabba Doo, and Bosom Buddy Barney too. I love those mumbling bears. I laugh at them until it hurts. And when it's banana splits, you don't eat them for dessert. Bristlehound is not a stranger. He saves lambs when in danger. Yogi Bear outsmarts the ranger. All in my TV. Those wacky friends who live in my TV.
Have a happy day.
Well, Bill and I were on his boat over at Catalina Island for the weekend, and we'd had a long week working in the studio, and we were over there and we started relaxing. We sat down on the back of his boat and we started writing the lyrics for that, and those were the lyrics for the Hanna-Barbera ride. It was supposed to be as if you were going into a big television set, and then you saw the cartoons from Hanna-Barbera live because they were all animated in 3D. So it was a great ride. It lasted for many years, and it was one of the real gems. It was the most expensive ride we built when we did Kings Island. I think the budget on it was $2.5 million, which today wouldn't buy the garbage cans to put around the park. So, but back then in '72, it was an expensive ride. It was a great ride, and it was a lot of fun. We recorded the music and those words and the soundtrack out at Glen Sound in L.A. A very famous musical producer by the name of Paul Decourt put that together for us. So that's how that's part of the ride, how the music came about.
Okay, the Enchanted Voyage was one of the most popular attractions in the park from 1972 to 1992 when it became the Smurf ride, and that was maybe one of the first real controversies for the park when it did make that change. Guests loved the Enchanted Voyage, but the Smurfs were, at that time, the new popular character, and it was a ride that for the next 10 years, was inside that building, and it was very similar to the ride that you had with the Enchanted Voyage. It was a boat ride that took you through.
Oh, the Smurf ride. Yes, I remember that. Nancy probably remembers it much because she also bought some of the merchandise for Smurf. All the big blue stuff. Everything was blue. We had Smurf ice cream and everything. But the Smurf ride was a pretty big transition. You took the Enchanted Voyage that was really a showcase for Hanna-Barbera. It was a museum, basically. I mean, it had some of the old-time characters in it, everything from Enchanted Voyage, and completely transformed it into the blue Smurf ride. So the boats were still there. You still had the carousel you got on. But it had a totally different theme song, and Nancy probably could even hum it for us a little bit.
La 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 la.
There you go. It is the original Smurf song. It played throughout the entire ride. And it was really a themed ride, a little bit differently. It was themed on seasons. So you had the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter seasons, and you had them, Gargamel, the bad character, was a little more scary. It was definitely more scary for the kids. And you had people like the bad character Gargamel who would go out there and scare a little bit. He was always chasing the Smurfs, him and his cat. So it was a completely different theme, and the Smurfs were big. I mean, it was a big deal. They were on TV every Saturday morning. So I really think they tried to capitalize on, obviously, the Smurf popularness. And it ran for, I guess, about 6 years, if I remember correctly, before it became something else.
By the time the Smurf craze was over, it was time for something new in there, and then it became Phantom Theater, and that was a little bit smaller scale than what you might see at the Disney parks, with the Haunted Mansion, but it was still a fun ride. It was a different ride. It was something that the park had not done before. It had some great animation in there. It did a real good job with the theming, with the ghost, and it was a pretty popular attraction. But again, 10 years later, it was time for another change with the building, and it's now what you see with Scooby-Doo had made a comeback. So it was time to bring Scooby back, on a little bit bigger stage than just being a character in the park. And it's now Scooby-Doo in the Haunted Castle. And if you walk around Nickelodeon Universe, the longest line you're going to see is for Scooby-Doo in the Haunted Castle. The most popular attraction that you had in Hanna-Barbera Land was the Enchanted Voyage. When you went through there, you had all the characters, from Hanna-Barbera Land as you went through the ride experience. And, it's a ride that even to this day, there's people that still remember the song and they still remember the attraction. And, they always say if you could ever bring something back, bring back the Enchanted Voyage and put the Hanna-Barbera characters in there. And then later years, it kind of transitioned, as things change over the years. And, Nickelodeon characters became, the end thing for young children. So the decision was made to change it from, Hanna-Barbera land to Nickelodeon Universe, and now you see the characters that are as popular to kids today that the Hanna-Barbera characters were. You know, SpongeBob, SquarePants, you have Dora the Explorer, Little Bill, you know, the Rugrats. So those are the characters that now kind of, you know, control the kids area. But our kids area, you know, it's a great place.
There were also other rides making their debut opening day 1972.
We tried to keep it as true and as themed as we possibly could to Hanna-Barbera, because again, that's kind of why Taft got into the business. They wanted to exploit, promote the those characters. The big ride, the other anchor ride that came into the area was the Sky Ride. And the Sky Ride ran from Hanna-Barbera land over into Coney Island. And after we got it stuck one year up there for about 4 hours one evening in a cold fall night, we decided to take that ride out, and we took it out. But the early pictures, if you look at Kings Island, you see the Sky Ride traversing the sky at night. Always a beautiful ride. Had the cabins with the lights underneath them, so it was really unique. We had Winsome Winnie's Cauldron Ride, and it was basically a takeoff of the Disney teacups. We had cauldrons that spun around with the witch in the middle of them. The anchor ride in the area was the Scooby-Doo roller coaster, which was a takeoff of our old Teddy Bear roller coaster, which was the children's coaster at Coney Island. So we rebuilt basically that size coaster, called it the Scooby-Doo. We had a Junior Turnpike ride, some other little small flat rides in the area, and we had the arbors leading through the area that took you from Hanna-Barbera into Rivertown and over towards the Eiffel Tower.
This part of the park may have started with Scooby-Doo and the gang, but now a new generation of children are here. SpongeBob SquarePants and the Rugrats are the new icons that live in children's hearts. But one simple rule still applies to all ages in this wonderland, and that rule is you're never too old to act like a kid again.
Have a happy day.